The morning sun barely broke through the thick Oregon clouds as 16-year-old Danny Carter pushed his shopping cart along the cracked sidewalk of downtown Portland. Inside the rusty cart lay everything he owned: 2 blankets, a torn backpack, 3 water bottles, and a photograph of his mother. The only thing left from a life that felt like someone else's dream. Danny had been on the streets for 8 months now, ever since his mom lost her battle with cancer, and the state couldn't find a foster home willing to take in a teenager with anger issues and a history of running away. But Danny wasn't angry anymore. He was just tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of people crossing the street when they saw him coming. Tired of sleeping under bridges and waking up to police officers kicking his feet, telling him to move along. He made his way toward Waterfront Park, where he usually spent his mornings watching the Willamette River flow past. There was something peaceful about the water, something that made him feel less alone. The park was already filling up with joggers and families setting up for weekend picnics. Danny found his usual spot behind a large oak tree, far enough from the main paths that people wouldn't complain about his presence. That's when he heard the rumble. It started as a distant thunder, growing louder with each passing second. Danny looked up to see a convoy of motorcycles rolling into the park's parking lot. Not just any motorcycles, Harley-Davidsons, dozens of them, their chrome gleaming even under the overcast sky. The riders wore black leather vests adorned with patches and insignias. Danny recognized the skull and wings immediately. Hell's Angels. His first instinct was to grab his cart and disappear. He had heard stories about biker gangs, none of them good. But something kept him frozen in place, watching as the bikers parked their machines in perfect formation. There had to be at least 50 of them, maybe more. A massive man with a gray beard that reached his chest climbed off the lead bike. His leather vest identified him as Big Mike, president of the Portland chapter. Next to him, a woman with long dark hair helped a young girl off the back of the motorcycle. The girl looked about 7 or 8, wearing a pink helmet that seemed too big for her small frame. The little girl ran toward the river, her laughter carrying across the park. Her mother called after her, but the child was already racing down the grassy slope toward the water's edge. Big Mike smiled, shaking his head with the amused exasperation of a father who had chased his daughter 1,000 times before. Danny watched as the bikers began unloading coolers and setting up what looked like a family gathering. It struck him as odd. These intimidating men with their leather and tattoos, acting like ordinary people having a barbecue. Some threw footballs, others cracked open beers, and a few gathered around a grill that was already smoking. The little girl in the pink helmet had wandered closer to the river than her parents realized. Danny could see her from his vantage point behind the oak tree. She was crouching at the water's edge, reaching for something floating just out of reach. A deflated beach ball bobbing in the current. Everything happened in seconds. The girl leaned too far. Her feet slipped on the muddy bank. She tumbled forward with a small cry that was swallowed by the splash. The Willamette River, swollen from recent rains, pulled her under immediately. Danny didn't think. His cart toppled as he sprinted across the grass, his worn sneakers pounding against the ground. He heard shouting behind him. Big Mike's voice, raw with terror, screaming his daughter's name. But Danny was closer. He was already at the water's edge when the girl's pink helmet surfaced 15 feet from shore, bobbing in the strong current. He dove in without hesitation. The cold water hit him like a wall of ice, stealing his breath. The current was stronger than he expected, pulling at his clothes, dragging him downstream. But he could see her, the pink helmet, and beneath it, the pale face of a terrified child whose mouth opened and closed without sound. Danny swam harder than he had ever swum in his life. His arms burned. His lungs screamed for air. He reached her just as she went under again, grabbing the back of her jacket and pulling her up. She coughed and sputtered, her small hands clutching at him with desperate strength. Getting back to shore was harder. The current fought him with every stroke. His legs cramped. Water filled his mouth and nose. But he kept the girl's head above water, kept swimming, kept pushing toward the voices shouting from the bank. Hands reached for them, strong hands pulling them from the river's grip. Danny felt solid ground beneath him and collapsed, coughing up river water, his body shaking uncontrollably. When he finally looked up, he was surrounded by Hell's Angels. Big Mike knelt beside his daughter, cradling her against his chest as she coughed and cried. His massive hands trembled as he checked her over, his weathered face twisted with relief and residual terror. The other bikers formed a tight circle around them, their expressions a mixture of shock and gratitude. Danny tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He sat there on the muddy bank, shivering violently, watching the reunion unfold before him. Nobody seemed to notice him anymore. He had done what needed to be done, and now he could fade back into invisibility like always. He started to crawl toward his overturned cart when a hand gripped his shoulder. Big Mike stood over him, his daughter wrapped in someone's leather jacket, safe in her mother's arms nearby. The biker president's eyes were wet, his jaw clenched tight. For a long moment, he just stared at Danny, and the boy felt a familiar fear creep into his chest. He had learned that gratitude from adults often came with conditions, with expectations he could never meet. "You saved my little girl," Big Mike said, his voice rough with emotion. Danny nodded, unsure what to say. He noticed the other bikers had moved closer, forming a larger circle. 50 pairs of eyes fixed on him. He became acutely aware of how he must look. Soaking wet, skinny, his clothes torn and dirty, his hair matted. A homeless kid who probably smelled like the streets he slept on. "What's your name, son?" Big Mike asked. "Danny," he managed to say through chattering teeth. "Where are your parents, Danny?" The question hit harder than the cold water had. Danny looked down at his muddy sneakers, the ones with holes in the soles that let rain seep through. "Don't have any." The silence that followed felt heavy. Danny could feel their judgment, their pity, maybe their disgust. He had seen it all before. That look people gave him when they realized he was homeless. That look that said he was less than, that he was broken, that he was something to be avoided. One of the bikers, a younger guy with a shaved head and a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, muttered something to his companion. Danny caught the word street kid and probably on drugs. The companion shook his head in response, but the damage was done. Danny felt the familiar burn of shame spread through his chest. He stood up, his legs still shaky, and started gathering his belongings from the scattered cart. "Thanks for pulling me out," he said quietly, avoiding eye contact. "I should go." "Wait," Big Mike said, but Danny was already moving, pushing his cart away from the crowd, away from their stares, away from the inevitable disappointment that always followed moments like these. Danny made it 20 feet before Big Mike's voice boomed across the park. "Stop right there, kid." It wasn't a request. Danny froze, his hands gripping the cart handle so tight his knuckles turned white. He heard heavy footsteps approaching from behind, multiple sets of boots hitting the grass. His heart hammered against his ribs. Maybe they were angry he had interrupted their gathering. Maybe they thought he had some ulterior motive for saving the girl. Big Mike walked around to face him, and this time his expression had changed. The fear and relief had transformed into something else, something Danny couldn't quite read. The biker president reached into his leather vest and pulled out his wallet. "Here, take this," Big Mike said, extending a wad of cash. Danny stared at the money. There had to be at least $300 in Big Mike's hand. More money than Danny had seen in months. His stomach twisted with a confusing mixture of need and pride. "I don't want your money," Danny heard himself say. The words surprised even him. Big Mike's eyebrows rose. "You don't want it? I didn't save her for money. I saved her because she needed help." The bikers exchanged glances. The younger one with the snake tattoo looked genuinely shocked. Big Mike studied Danny for a long moment, then slowly put his wallet away. "What do you need, Danny? Where are you staying?" "Under the Burnside Bridge," Danny admitted, immediately regretting his honesty. Big Mike's jaw tightened. His daughter, now recovered and curious, peeked around her mother's legs to look at the boy who had saved her. Her big brown eyes were wide with interest. "You got any food?" Big Mike asked. Danny shrugged. "I'll figure it out. I always do." "That's not an answer, son." The woman holding the little girl stepped forward. Her name was Sarah, Danny would later learn, and she was Big Mike's wife of 12 years. She looked at her husband with an expression that needed no words. Big Mike nodded slowly, then turned back to Danny. "You're coming with us," he said firmly. "I don't need charity," Danny protested, even as his empty stomach betrayed him with a low growl. "This isn't charity. This is family taking care of family. You risked your life for my daughter. That makes you one of us now." Danny wanted to argue, wanted to push his cart away and disappear like he always did. But something in Big Mike's voice stopped him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was something Danny hadn't heard in a very long time: genuine care. If you're hoping this story has a happy ending, stick around. Hit that subscribe button because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. This is just the beginning. The little girl broke free from her mother and ran to Danny, wrapping her small arms around his wet legs. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered. Danny looked down at her, then up at the circle of bikers watching him, and for the first time in 8 months, he didn't feel invisible. The barbecue that afternoon changed everything Danny thought he knew about the world. Big Mike insisted Danny sit at the head of the picnic table, wrapped in a dry Hell's Angels hoodie that hung past his knees. The bikers piled his plate with burgers, hot dogs, potato salad, and corn on the cob until he couldn't see the paper plate beneath the food. Danny ate slowly at first, self-conscious about the way his hands shook as he lifted the burger to his mouth. But nobody stared. Nobody judged. They just kept the food coming. Sarah sat beside him with her daughter, whose name was Emma. The little girl hadn't left Danny's side since hugging him at the river. She chattered excitedly about her favorite cartoons, her pet hamster named Mr. Whiskers, and how she wanted to be a marine biologist when she grew up so she could swim with dolphins. "You're really brave," Emma told Danny between bites of her hot dog. "Braver than anyone I know." Danny didn't feel brave. He felt like a fraud sitting among these people who had welcomed him so completely. But Emma's genuine admiration made something crack open in his chest. Something that had been sealed shut since his mother died. As the afternoon wore on, the bikers took turns introducing themselves. There was Tiny, who stood 6'7" and had arms like tree trunks. There was Red, a woman with a crimson mohawk who worked as an ER nurse. There was Preacher, an ex-military chaplain who still wore his dog tags. Each of them had a story, and each of them treated Danny like he mattered. Big Mike pulled up a chair across from Danny as the sun began to set. The biker president's eyes were serious now, thoughtful. "My brothers and I talked," he said. "We want to help you, Danny. Really help you." Danny set down his third burger, suddenly nervous. "I told you I don't need charity." Big Mike held up a hand. "Hear me out. We have a clubhouse, big place on the east side. Storage room in the back that's basically empty. We can set you up there. Bed, shower, hot meals. In exchange, you help out around the place. Maintenance, cleaning, whatever needs doing. Fair trade. You work, you earn your keep." Danny's throat tightened. "Why would you do this?" "Because 8 months ago, my club lost a prospect in a motorcycle accident. Kid was 19, no family, nobody to claim him. We buried him ourselves." Big Mike's voice grew thick. "I think about him every day. Think about how we could have done more, could have been there sooner. Then today I watched my daughter almost die, and you, a kid who has nothing. You gave everything to save her." Big Mike leaned forward. "You don't get a second chance to save everyone, Danny. But sometimes God gives you a chance to make things right. Let us make this right." Danny looked around at the faces watching him. 50 bikers who had turned their Sunday into a rescue mission for a homeless teenager they didn't know. Emma grabbed his hand under the table and squeezed. "Okay," Danny whispered. "Okay." The Hells Angels clubhouse on Southeast 82nd Avenue became Danny's home that very night. True to Big Mike's word, they converted the storage room into a proper bedroom. Within hours, bikers arrived with a twin bed, a dresser, a small desk, and even a lamp shaped like a motorcycle. Red brought sheets that still smelled like fabric softener. Tiny installed a lock on the door, from the inside only, so Danny would feel safe. Preacher hung curtains that actually matched the bedspread. Danny stood in the doorway, unable to speak. He had expected a cot and maybe a blanket. Instead, he was looking at a real room. His room. "Welcome home, brother," Big Mike said, clapping him on the shoulder. The first week was an adjustment. Danny woke up multiple times each night, convinced it was all a dream, that he would open his eyes and find himself back under the Burnside Bridge with rain soaking through his blankets. But every morning, he woke up in a warm bed, to the smell of coffee brewing in the clubhouse kitchen. The bikers kept their word about the work arrangement. Danny cleaned the clubhouse, organized the garage, helped with oil changes and basic maintenance on the motorcycles. But they gave him more than work, they gave him purpose. Big Mike enrolled him in an online high school program so he could finish his diploma. Red taught him how to cook meals that didn't come from a can. Tiny showed him how to change a tire and check brake fluid. Emma visited every weekend with Sarah. She would sit at the kitchen table doing her homework while Danny did his, occasionally looking up to ask him for help with her math problems. Danny discovered he was good at math, that his brain worked in ways that made numbers and equations make sense. Sarah noticed too. "You ever think about college?" she asked him one Saturday afternoon. Danny laughed. "I'm just trying to survive high school." But Sarah didn't laugh. "You're smart, Danny. Really smart. Don't sell yourself short." 3 months after moving into the clubhouse, Big Mike called a full club meeting. Danny had been to a few before, always as an observer, never as a participant. But this time, Big Mike gestured for him to stand at the front of the room with him. "Brothers and sisters," Big Mike announced to the assembled club. "3 months ago, this young man saved my daughter's life. Since then, he's proven himself to be hardworking, honest, and loyal. He's earned his place here." Big Mike held up a leather vest, smaller than the others, but bearing the same skull and wings patch. "The Hells Angels insignia. Danny Carter, we'd like to offer you prospect status. You'll be under our protection, part of our family officially. What do you say?" Danny looked around the room at the faces that had become familiar, at the people who had given him back his life. His eyes burned with tears he didn't try to hide. "I say yes," he managed. "I say thank you." The clubhouse erupted in cheers and applause. Emma ran forward and hugged him tight. For the first time since his mother died, Danny felt like he belonged somewhere. 5 years later, Danny Carter stood on the stage at Portland Community College, adjusting his graduation cap as the dean called his name. Daniel Carter, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, summa cum laude. The applause that erupted wasn't polite or scattered. It was thunderous. In the third row sat 200 Hells Angels members, their leather vests a sea of black among the proud families. They stood as one, cheering and whistling as Danny crossed the stage to accept his diploma. Big Mike wiped his eyes unashamedly. Sarah beamed with pride. And Emma, now 13 and sitting between her parents, held up a handmade sign that read, "My hero graduated." Danny had kept his promise. After earning his high school diploma, he had enrolled in community college with scholarships Red helped him apply for. He worked part-time at the clubhouse's motorcycle repair shop, which had expanded into a legitimate business with Danny's help, and studied late into the nights. The storage room had long since been upgraded to a small apartment above the shop, but Danny still kept the motorcycle lamp on his desk. The bikers had been there for every milestone. When Danny aced his first college exam, Tiny bought him his first laptop. When he struggled with physics, Preacher found him a tutor. When he doubted himself, Big Mike reminded him of the scared 16-year-old who had dove into a river without hesitation. Told him that same courage lived inside him still. After the ceremony, the club threw a graduation party that shut down 2 blocks of southeast Portland. Local news crews showed up, intrigued by the story of the homeless teenager turned engineer, mentored by a motorcycle club. Danny gave interviews, but he always redirected the focus. "They saved me," he told the reporters. "I just saved one person. They saved my entire life." As the sun set over Portland, Danny found himself by the Willamette River with Emma. She was taller now, confident, already talking about following Danny to college in a few years. "Do you ever think about that day?" Emma asked, watching the water flow past. "Every single day," Danny admitted. "It was the worst day and the best day of my life." Emma smiled. "Dad says you're going to work for Boeing after graduation." Big fancy aerospace job. Danny nodded. But I'm staying in Portland. The club is my family. I'm not going anywhere. Good, Emma said simply. Because you're my big brother now. You don't get to leave. Danny laughed and pulled her into a side hug. Behind them, the party continued. 200 bikers celebrating not just a graduation, but a life reclaimed, a family forged, and a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely people become heroes. Big Mike approached them, carrying 2 bottles of root beer. He handed one to Emma and one to Danny, then raised his own beer in a toast. To second chances, Big Mike said. To family, Danny added. To the bravest boy I ever met, Emma finished. They clinked their bottles together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the river gold.